Wow. It's Makers. How's your day going, Makers? You still all painty? Painty and dainty? Finished 2 things and 2 are half done. Appreciate D&D Wednesdays, the amount of prep for an event he's doing this weekend. So I think, speaking of events and stuff, things, I will probably do like a strict 2-hour stream on this one because I've been streaming a lot lately. I need to give my voice a little bit of a rest, seeing as I also spend a lot of time during the day at work speaking. I'm also tired. Done a lot of talking and not enough sleeping. And I'm just feeling just a touch under the weather. Nothing too serious, nothing too concerning. I'm just tired. I need sleep. Need big EPs. We'll do some reading till 10, then I'll yeet myself into a nice, steamy, hot shower. And then I'm going to pass the fuck out. What I will do in that shower, I will leave to the imagination. Otherwise, I will be in violation of Twitch's terms of service. just going to sit in the starting now screen for a bit. Let it give some people a little time to roll on in. I feel bad getting straight back into the book and having people miss stuff. Fixed a ring you like that's been broken for a little bit. Oh, that's cool. Not only is it a good fidget ring, it's just neat. It's a neat little talking. I really need to overhaul the ranks in my Discord server and set it up so that the bot will give you ranks for like notification for all streams, cooking streams, gaming streams, or reading streams. That's what I want to do. I get a bit of that option paralysis too. Oh yeah, I need to allow link posting for my own clips. Let's do that while things are quiet. We got ads coming up in a couple of minutes. Well, we got ads now. All right. There we go. Ayy. Dumb but fun. Blepmarid complete. Try this one. All right. Alrighty, righty. Let's get to reading, shall we? Transition sound kind of loud. Oh, hi, Llama Palooza. Transitions. You know the really annoying thing, makers, is that it was meant to have the sound disabled, but here I'll just do this with a new file. Let's check now. Bloop, bloop. Any loud sounds this time? I fixed it. I did the fix. Just the bloops. Bloop. Sweet. Llama, how's your day going? And makers, I learned that it's very easy to convert OBS into what's called portable mode, which means all of your shit in OBS lives in a single folder, which makes it really easy to back up or move to other machines. And do be a thing. Because my stream setup is now too large to use the Stream Elements cloud backup to synchronize it between my my laptop and my desktop. So I was like, I now have to find another way to do the thing. It's because of all my animated bits and pieces. I didn't want to sacrifice quality, so some of them have like fairly chunky file sizes to them. Days good, did therapy, played Fallout 76, made dinner. What was for dinner? And now in bed for story time. Ah, soup dumplings. Soup dumplings. I've got a bunch of Hargyle shrimp dumplings stashed away in my freezer because my son is addicted to them, and also a bunch of glutinous rice wrapped in lotus leaves stuff with chicken and pork and all sorts of good stuff. I love glutinous rice. Chinese and Japanese food, top tier. I love that stuff. Okay, I'm going to read some words now. Let me know if my music is too high and I'll turn it down, or if it's too low and I'll turn it up. Vietnamese food's good as well. Pho is amazing. I love Mexican food. I love Sri Lankan food. I love Indian food as well. But if I had to choose, I'd choose like Chinese and Japanese. Like in food. Okay, let's speed run a food tier list here then. Top foods tied for number one: Chinese and Japanese. Second would be Indian, Sri Lankan. Third would be Mexican. Mexican like Latin food. Fourth would be Vietnamese. Fifth, Thai. Sixth, the rest. Western food. It rules out a chunk, but the Japanese have amazing poultry dishes. I mean, to illustrate that, their eggs are so, like their food safety and food standards are so high, you can eat their eggs raw. They have like 5 cases of food poisoning nationally a year from eggs. Their beef dishes are amazing as well. I guess I must have lots of competition tonight. The usual suspects haven't showed up. Oh well. And so it goes. Okay. This music is a little bit too upbeat when I'm about to be reading. It was a dispirited group that emerged from the mine. The survivors sank to the ground, near exhaustion. Pug had fought tears for hours after Thomas had fled, and now he lay on the wet ground, staring upward at the grey sky, feeling numb. Cargan had fared worst of all, being completely drained of energy by the spell used to repel the wraith. He had been carried on the shoulders of the others most of the way, and they showed the price of their burden. All fell into an exhausted sleep, except Dolgan, who lit a fire and stood watch. Pug awoke to the sound of voices and a clear, starry night. The smell of food cooking greeted him. When Garden and the 3 remaining guards awakened, Dolgan had left them to watch over the others and had snared a brace of rabbits. These were roasting over a fire. The others awoke except Culgan, who snored deeply. Arutha and the Duke saw the boy wake, and the prince came to where he sat. The younger son of the Duke, ignoring the snow, sat on the ground next to Pug, who had his cloak wrapped around him. "How do you feel, Pug?" Arutha asked, concern showing in his eyes. This was the first time Pug had seen Arutha's gentler nature. Pug tried to speak and found tears coming to his eyes. Thomas had been his friend for as long as he could remember, more a brother than a friend. As he tried to speak, great racking sobs broke from his throat. And he felt this music is not the fucking vibe. Hold on, chat. Reading some somber shit and the music's like and he's like ripping me out of my immersion here. I gotta fix this. Much better. Holy fuck. Right. Back to reading about sad shit. Thomas had been his friend as long as he could remember, more a brother than a friend. As he tried to speak, great, racking sobs broke from his throat, and he felt hot, salty tears run down into his mouth. Arutha placed his arm around Pug, letting the boy cry on his shoulder. When the initial flood of grief had passed, the prince said, "There is nothing shameful in mourning the loss of a friend, Pug. My father and I share your pain." Dolgan came to stand behind the prince. "I also, Pug, for he was a likeable lad. We all share your loss." The dwarf seemed to consider something and spoke to the Duke. Culgan had just awakened, sitting up like a bear waking from winter's sleep. He regained his bearings and seeing Arutha with Pug, quickly forgot his own aching joints and joined them. There was little they could say, but Pug found comfort in their closeness. He finally regained his composure, and pulling away from the prince, "Thank you, your highness," he said, sniffing. I will be all right." They joined Dolgan, Garden, and the Duke near the fire. Boric was shaking his head at something the dwarf said. "I thank you for your bravery, Dolgan, but I can't allow it." Dolgan puffed on his pipe, a friendly smile splitting his beard. "And how do you intend to stop me, your grace? Surely not by force." Boric shook his head. "No, of course not, but to go would be the sheerest folly." Culgan and Arutha exchanged questioning looks. Pug paid little attention, being lost in a cold, numb world. In spite of having just awakened, he felt ready for sleep again, welcoming its warm, soft relief. Boric told them, "This mad dwarf means to return to the mines." Before Culgan and Arutha could voice a protest, Dolgan said, "I know there is only a slim hope, but if the boy has eluded the foul spirit, he'll be wandering lost and alone. There are tunnels down there that have never known the tread of a dwarf's foot, let alone a boy's. Once down such a passage,
I'll have no trouble making my way back. But Thomas has no such natural sense. If I can find his trail, I can find him. If he's to have any chance of escaping the mines, he'll be needing my guidance. I'll bring home the boy if he lives. On this you have the word of Dolgan Targarson, chief of the village Caldera. I could not rest in my long haul this winter if I did not try. I didn't try. Pug was roused from his lethargy by the dwarf's words. Do you think you can find him, Dolgan? If any can, I can, he said. He leaned close to Pug. Don't get your hopes too high, for it's unlikely that Thomas eluded the wraith. I'd do you a disservice if I said otherwise, boy. Seeing the tears brimming in Pug's eyes again, he quickly added, But if there is a way, I shall find it. Pug nodded, seeking a middle path between desolation and renewed hope. He understood the admonition, but still could not give up the faint flicker of comfort Dolgan's undertaking would provide. Dolgan crossed over to where his shield and axe lay and picked them up. When dawn comes, quickly follow the trail down to the hills and through the woodlands. While not the Greenheart, this place is menace aplenty for so small a band. If you lose your way, head due east. You'll find your way the road to Borden. From there, it's a matter of 3 days' walk. May the gods protect you. Boric nodded, and Culgan walked over to where the dwarf made ready to leave. He handed Dolgan a pouch. I can get mortar back in the town, friend dwarf. Please, take this. Dolgan took it and smiled at Culgan. Thank ye, magician. I'm in your debt. Boric came to stand before the dwarf and placed a hand on his shoulder. It is we who are in your debt, Dolgan. If you come to Cryde, we will have that meal you were promised. That and more. May good fortune go with you. Thank ye, your lordship. I look forward to it. Without another word, Dolgan walked into the blackness of Mac Mordain Cadal. Dolgan stopped by the dead mules, pausing only long enough to pick up food, water, and a lantern. The dwarf needed no light to make his way underground. His people had long ago adapted other senses for the darkness. But, he thought, it will increase his chances of finding Thomas if the boy can see the light, no matter the risk of attracting unwelcome attention. Assuming he was still alive, he added grimly. Entering the tunnel where he had last seen Thomas. Thomas! Although there's no H in Thomas's spelling in this one. Dolgan searched about for signs of the boy's passing. The dust was thin, but here and there he could make out a slight disturbance, perhaps a footprint. Following, the dwarf came to even dustier passages where the boy's footprints were clearly marked. Hurrying, he followed them. Dolgan came back to the same cavern after a few minutes and cursed. He felt little hope of finding the boy's tracks again among the disturbance caused by the fight with the wraith. After an hour, he found a single footprint heading away from the cavern through a tunnel to the right of where he had entered the first time. Moving up it, he found several more prints set wide apart and decided the boy must have been running. Hurrying on, he saw more tracks as the passage became dustier. Dolgan came to the cavern on the lake and nearly lost the trail again until he saw the tunnel near the edge of the landing. He slogged through the water, pulling himself up into the passage, and saw Thomas's tracks. His faint lantern light was insufficient to illuminate the crystals in the cavern, but even if it had, he would not have paused to admire the sight, so intent was he on finding the boy. Downward he followed, never resting. He knew that Thomas had long before outdistanced the wraith. There were signs that most of his journey was at a slower pace. Footprints in the dust showed he had been walking, and the cold campfire showed he had stopped. But there were other terrors beside the wraiths down here, just as dreadful. Thorgan again lost the trail in the last cavern, finding it only when he spied the ledge above where the tracks ended. He had difficulty climbing to it, but when he did, he saw the blackened spot where the boy had snuffed out his torch. Here, Thomas must have rested. Dolgan looked around the empty cavern. The air did not move this much deep below the mountains. Even the dwarf, who was used to such things, found this an unnerving place. He looked down at the black mark on the ledge. But how long did Thomas stay, and where did he go? Dolgan saw the hole in the wall, since no tracks led away from the ledge, decided that this was the way Thomas must have gone. He climbed through and followed the passage until it came to a larger one, heading downward into the bowels of the mountain. Dolgan followed what seemed to be a group of tracks, as if a band of men had come this way. Thomas's tracks were mixed in, and he worried, for the boy could have been along this way before or after the others, or he could have been with them. If the boy was held prisoner by someone, Dolgan knew that every moment was critical. The tunnel wound downwards, and soon changed into a hall fashioned from great stone blocks, fitted closely together and polished smooth. In all his years, he had never seen its like. The passage levelled out, and Dolgan walked along quietly. The tracks had vanished, for the stone was hard and free of dust. High overhead, Dolgan could make out the first of several crystal chandeliers, hung overhead from the ceiling by chains. They could be lowered by means of a pulley so that the candles might be lit. The sound of his boots echoed hollowly off the high ceiling. At the far end of the passage he spied large doors, fashioned from woods with bands of iron and a great lock. They were ajar, and light could be seen coming through. Without a sound, Dolgan crept close to the doors and peered in. He gaped at what he saw, his shield and axe coming up instinctively. Sitting on a pile of gold coins and gems the size of a man's fist was Thomas, eating what looked to be a fish. Opposite him crouched a figure that caused Dolgan to doubt his eyes. A head the size of a small wagon rested on the floor. Shield-sized scales of a deep golden colour covered it, and the long, supple neck led back to a huge body extending into the gloom of the giant hall. Enormous wings were folded across its back, their drooping tips touching the floor. Two pointed ears sat atop its head, separated by a delicate-looking crest flecked with silver. Its long muzzle was set in a wolf-like grin, showing fangs as long as broadswords, and a long forked tongue flicked out for a moment. Dolgan fought down the overwhelming and rare urge to run, for Thomas was sitting, and to all appearances, sharing a meal with the dwarven folk's most feared hereditary enemy, a great dragon. He stepped forward, and his boots clacked on the stone floor. Thomas turned at the sound, and the dragon's great head came up. Giant ruby eyes regarded the small intruder. Thomas jumped to his feet, an expression of joy upon his face. Dolgan! He scrambled from the pile of wealth and rushed to the dwarf. The dragon's voice rumbled through the great hall, echoing like thunder through a valley.
Welcome, dwarf. Thy friend hath told me that thou wouldst not forsake him.
Thomas stood before the dwarf, asking a dozen questions, while Dolgan's senses reeled. Behind the boy, the prince of all dragons sat quietly, observing the exchange, and the dwarf was having trouble maintaining the I have forgotten how to pronounce this word. 2 seconds, chat. There we go. And the dwarf was having trouble maintaining the equanimity that was normally his. Making little sense of Thomas's questions, Dolgan gently pushed him to one side to better see the dragon. "I came alone," he said softly to the boy. "The others were loath to leave the search to me, but they had to press on. So vital was the mission." Thomas said, "I understand." "What manner of wizardry is this?" Dolgan asked softly. The dragon chuckled, and the room rumbled with the sound.
Come into my home, dwarf, and I will tell thee.
The great dragon's head returned to the floor, his eyes still resting above Dolgan's head. The dwarf approached slowly, shield and axe unconsciously at the ready. The dragon laughed, a deep, echoing sound. Not like water cascading down a canyon.
Stay thy hand, small warrior. I'll not harm thee or thy friend.
Dolgan let his shield down and hung an axe on his belt. He looked around and saw that they were standing in a vast hall, fashioned out of the living rock of the mountain. On its walls could be seen large tapestries and banners. Faded and torn, something about their look set Dolgan's teeth on edge, for they were as alien as they were ancient. No creature he knew of, human, elf, or goblin, fashioned those pennants. More of the giant crystal chandeliers hung from timbers across the ceiling. At the far end of the hall, a throne could be seen upon a dais, and long tables with chairs for many diners stood before it. Upon the tables were flagons of crystal and plates of gold, and all was covered with the dust of ages. Elsewhere in the hall lay piles of wealth, gold, gems, crowns, silver, rich armor, bolts of rare cloth, and carved chests of precious woods, fitted with inlaid emeralds of great craft. Dolgan sat upon a lifetime's riches of gold, absently moving it around to make as comfortable a seat as possible. Thomas sat next to him as the dwarf pulled out his pipe. He didn't show it, but he felt the need to calm himself, and his pipe always soothed his nerves. He lit a taper from his lantern and struck it to his pipe. The dragon watched him and then said,
Canst thou now breathe fire and smoke, dwarf? Art thou the new dragon? Hath ever a dragon been so small?
Dolgan shook his head. "'Tis but my pipe." He explained the use of tobacco. The dragon said,
"'Tis but this is a strange thing, but thine are a strange folk, in truth."
Dolgan cocked a brow at this, but said nothing. Thomas, How did you come to this place? Thomas seemed unmindful of the dragon, and Dorgan found this reassuring. If the great beast had wished to harm them, he could have done so with little effort. Dragons were undisputably the mightiest creatures on Midkemia, and this was the mightiest dragon Dorgan had heard of, half again the size of those he had fought in his youth. Thomas finished the fish he had been eating and said, I wandered for a long time and came to a place where I could sleep. I found it. I woke at the sound of something and found tracks that led here. Those I saw also. I was afraid you'd been taken. I wasn't. It was a party of goblins and a few dark brothers coming to this place. They were very concerned about what was ahead, didn't pay attention to what was behind, so I could follow fairly close. That was a dangerous thing to do. I know, but I was desperate for a way out. I thought they might lead me to the surface. I could wait a while they went on ahead, then slip out. If I could get out of the mines, I could have headed north toward your village. A bold plan, Thomas, said Dorgan, an approving look in his eyes. They came to this place, and I followed. What happened to them? The dragon spoke.
I sent them away, far away, dwarf, but they were not the company I would choose.
Sent them away? How? The dragon raised his head a little, and Dorgan could see that his scales were faded and dull in places. The red eyes were filmed over slightly, and suddenly Dorgan knew that the dragon was blind.
The dragons have long had magic, though it is unlike any other. It is by my arts that I can see thee, dwarf, for the light hath long been denied me. I took the foul creatures and sent them far to the north. They do not know how they came to that place, nor remember this
place. Hey makers, my dragon little voice thing is working, right? It's not going to be choked. Cool. That was my test thing yesterday that I was tinkering with. I was like, I'm going to need some non-human voices very shortly in this book. Dorgan puffed on his pipe, thinking on what he was hearing. In the tales of my people, there are legends of dragon magicians, though you are the first I have seen. The dragon lowered his head to the floor slowly, as if tired.
For I am one of the last of the golden dragons and dwarf, and none of the lesser dragons have the art of sorcery. I have sworn never to take a life, but I would not have their kind invade my resting place.
Thomas spoke up. Rua's been kind to me, Dorgan. He let me stay until you found me, for he knew someone was coming. Dorgan looked at the dragon, wondering at his foretelling. Thomas continued, He gave me some smoked fish to eat, a place to rest. Smoked fish? The dragon said.
The kobolds, those thou knowest as gnomes, worship me as a god and bring me offerings, fish caught in the deep lake and smoke, and treasure gleaned from deeper halls.
Aye, said Dorgan. Gnomes have never been known for being overly bright. The dragon chuckled.
True, the kobolds are shy and harm only those who trouble them in their deep tunnels. They are a simple folk, and it pleaseth them to have a god. As I am not able to hunt, it is an agreeable arrangement.
Dorgan considered his next question. I mean, no disrespect, Rauch, but has it has ever been my experience with dragons that you've little love for others of your own kind? Why have you aided the boy? The dragon closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again to stare blankly toward the dwarf.
Know this, dwarf, that such was not always the way of it. Thy people are old, but mine are the oldest of all save one. We were here before the elves and the Morid hell. We served those whose names may not be spoken, and we were a happy people.
The Dragon Lords?
So your legend told them. They were our masters, and we were their servants, as were the elves and the Morid hell. When they left this land on a journey beyond imagining, we became the most powerful of the free people. In a time before the dwarves or men came to these lands, ours was a dominion over the skies and all things, for we were mighty before any other. Ages ago, men and dwarves came to our mountains, and for a time we lived in peace. But ways changed, and soon strife came. The elves drove the Morid hell from the forest now called Elvendar, and men and dwarves warred with dragons. We were strong, but humans are like the trees of the forest, and their numbers uncountable. Slowly my people fled to the south, and I am the last in these mountains. I have lived here for ages, for I would not forsake my home. By magic, I could turn away those who sought this treasure and kill those whose art spoiled my clouding of the mind. I am sickened of the killing, and vowed to take no more lives, even those as hateful as the Morid hell. That is why I sent them far, and why I aided the boy, for he is undeserving of harm.
Dolgan studied the dragon. I thank you, Rao.
Thy thanks are welcome, Dolgan of Grey Towers. I am glad of thy coming also. It is only a little longer that I could shelter the boy, for I summoned Thomas to my side by magic arts, so he might sit my death watch.
What? Exclaimed Thomas.
It is given to dragons to know the hour of their death, Thomas, and mine is close. I am old even by measure of my people, and have led a full life. I am content for it to be so. It is our way.
Dolgan looked troubled. Still, I find it strange to sit here, hearing you speak of this.
Why, dwarf? Is it not true with thine own people that one dieth, it is accounted how well he lived, rather than how long?
You have the truth of that?
Then why should it matter if the death hour is known or not? It is still the same. I have had all that one of my kind could hope for. Health, mates, young, riches, and rest. These are all I have ever wanted, and I have had them all.
'Tis a wise thing to know what's wanted, wiser still to know when it's achieved, said Dolgan.
True, and wiser still to know when it is unachievable, but then striving is folly. It is the way of my people to sit the death watch, but there are none of my kind near enough to call. I would ask thee to wait my passing before leaving. Wilt thou?
Dolgan looked at Thomas, who bobbed his head in agreement. Aye, dragon, although it's not a thing to gladden our hearts. The dragon closed his eyes, and Dolgan could see they were beginning to swell shut.
Thanks to thee, Dolgan, and to thee, Thomas.
The dragon lay there and spoke to them of his life, flying skies of Midkemia, of far lands where tigers lived in cities, and mountains where eagles could speak. Tales of wonder and awe were told long into the night. When his voice began to falter, Ruach said,
Once a man came to this place, a magician, mighty art. He could not be turned from this place by magic, nor could I slay him. For 3 days we battled, his arts against mine, and when done, he had bested me. I thought he would slay me and carry off my riches. But he insisted he stayed, for his only thought was to learn my magic, so it would not be lost when I passed.
Thomas sat in wonder, for as little as he knew about magic from Pug, he thought this a marvelous thing. In his mind's eye he could see the titanic struggle and the great powers working.
With him he had a strange creature, much like a goblin, though upright, and features with finer of aspect. For 3 years he stayed with me, while his servant came and went. He learned all I could teach, for I could deny him not, but he taught as well, and his wisdom gave me great comfort. It is because of him that I learned to respect life, no matter how mean of character, and vowed to spare any that came to me. He had also suffered at the hands of others, as I had in the wars with men, for much that I cherished was lost. This man had the art of healing the wounds of heart and mind, and when he left, I felt the victor, not the vanquished.
He paused and swallowed, and Thomas could see that speech was coming to him with more difficulty.
If a dragon could have attended my death watch, I would have soon had him sit here, for he was the first of thy kind, boy, that I would count a friend.
Who was he, Raoul? Thomas asked.
He was called Macross.
Dolgan looked thoughtful. I've heard his name, a magician of most puissant arts. He's nearly a myth, having lived somewhere to the east.
A myth he is not, Dolgan.
Raoul said thickly.
Still, it may be that he is dead, for he dwelt with me ages ago.
The dragon paused.
My time is now close, so I must finish. I would ask boon of thee, dwarf.
He moved his head slightly and said,
In yon box is a gift from the mage, to be used at this time. It is a rod fashioned of magic. Macross left it, so that when I die no bones will be left for scavengers to pick over. Will you bring it to me?
Dolgan went to the indicated chest. He opened it to discover a black metal rod lying upon a blue velvet cloth. He picked up the rod and found it surprisingly heavy for its size. He carried it over to the dragon. The dragon spoke, his words nearly unintelligible, for his tongue was swollen.
In a moment, touch me with rod, Dolgan. Then I will.
Aye, said Dolgan, though it will give me scant pleasure to see your end, dragon.
Before that, I have one last thing to tell. In a box next to the other is a gift for you, dwarf. Thou mayest take whatever else here pleaseth thee, for I have no use for it. But of all this in the hall, that in the box is what I wish thee to have.
He tried to move his head towards Thomas, but could not.
Thomas, thanks to thee for spending my
heard his breath rattle in his throat. Dolgan extended the rod and lightly touched the dragon on the head with it. At first, nothing happened. Raruch said softly,
It was gross.
Suddenly, a golden light began to form around the dragon.
A faint
Wrong voice. A faint humming could be heard, as if the walls of the hall reverberated with fey magic. The sound increased as the light grew brighter and began to pulse with energy. Thomas and Dolgan watched as discolored patches faded from Raruch's scales. His hide shone with golden sparkle, and the film started to lift from his eyes. He slowly raised his head, and they knew he could again see the hall around him. His crest stood erect, and his wings lifted, showing the rich silver sheen underneath. The yellowed teeth became brilliant white, and his faded black claws shone like polished ebony as he stood upright, lifting his head high. Dolgan said softly, "'Tis the grandest sight I ever beheld." Slowly the light grew in intensity as Raruch returned to the image of his youthful power. He pulled himself to his full, impressive height, his crest dancing with silver lights. The dragon threw back his head, a youthful, vigorous motion, and with a shout of joy sent a powerful blast of flame into the high vaulted ceiling. With a roar like 100 trumpets, he shouted,
I thank thee, Macross. It was a princely gift indeed.
Then the strange harmonic thrumming changed in tone, becoming more insistent, louder. For a brief instant, Dolgan and Thomas thought a voice could be heard among the pulsing tones, a deep, hollow echo, saying, "You are welcome, friend." Thomas felt wetness on his face and touched it. Tears of joy from the dragon's sheer beauty were running down his cheeks. The dragon's great golden wings unfolded as if he were about to launch himself in flight. The shimmering light became so bright, Thomas and Dolgan could barely stand to look, though they could not pull their eyes from the spectacle. The sound in the room grew to a pitch so loud, dust fell from the ceiling upon their heads, and they could feel the floor shake. The dragon launched himself upwards, wings extended, and then vanished in a blinding flash of cold, white light. Suddenly the room was as it had been, and the sound was gone. The emptiness in the cavern felt oppressive after the dragon vanished, and Thomas looked at the dwarf. "Let's leave, Dolgan. I've little wish to stay." Dolgan looked thoughtful. "Aye, Thomas. I also have little desire to stay. Still, there's the matter of the dragon's gifts." He crossed over to the box Dolgan had identified and opened it. Dolgan's eyes became round as he reached in and pulled out a dwarven hammer. The head was made from a silver metal that shone in the lantern light with bluish highlights. Across the side were carved dwarven symbols. The haft was carved oak, with scrollwork running the length. It was polished, and the deep, rich grain showed through the finish. Dolgan said faintly, "'Tis the hammer of Tholin, long removed from my people. Its return will cause rejoicing in every dwarven long hall throughout the west. It's the symbol of our last king, lost ages ago." Thomas came over to watch and saw something else in the box. He reached past Dolgan and pulled out a large bundle of white cloth. He unrolled it and found that the cloth was a tabard of white with a golden dragon emblazoned on the front. Inside were a shield with the same device and a golden helm. Most marvelous of all was a golden sword with a white hilt. Its scabbard was fashioned from smooth white material like ivory, but stronger like metal. Beneath the bundle lay a coat of golden chainmail, which he removed with a "oh" of wonder. Dolgan watched him and said, "Take them, boy. The dragon said it was your gift." "They're too fine for me, Dolgan. They belong to a prince or a king." "I'm thinking the previous owner has scant use for them, laddie. They were freely given. You may do what you will. I think there's something special to them. They wouldn't have been placed in the box with the hammer. Thorin's hammer is a weapon of power, forged in ancient hearths of Mac Cadman Alair, the oldest mine of these mountains. In it rests magic unsurpassed in the history of the dwarves. It's likely the gilded armour and the sword are also such. It may be there's a purpose in their coming to you." Thomas thought for a moment, then quickly pulled off his great cloak. His tunic was no gambeson, but the golden mail went over it easily enough, being fashioned for someone of larger stature. He pulled the tabard over it and put the helm upon his head. Picking up the sword, the shield, he stood beside Dolgan. "Do I look foolish?" The dwarf regarded him closely. "They're a bit large, but you'll grow into them, no doubt." He thought he saw something in the way the boy stood and held the sword in one hand and the shield in the other. "No, Thomas, you dinna look foolish. Perhaps not at ease, but not foolish. They're grand, and you'll come to wear them as they were meant to be worn, I think." Thomas nodded, picked up his cloak, and turned towards the door, putting up his sword. The armour was surprisingly light, much lighter than what he had worn at Cridey. The boy said, "I don't feel like taking anything else, Dolgan. Suppose that sounds strange." Dolgan walked over to him. "Nay, boy, for I also wish nothing of the dragon's riches." With a backward glance at the hull, he added, "Though, there'll be nights to come when I will wonder at the wisdom of that. I may return some day, but I doubt it. Now, let's find a way home." They set off, and soon were in tunnels Dolgan knew well, taking them back to the surface. We'll pause there for a second. Doing a hick and lurk. The voice sounds so sick. Hairs on your neck standing up. You like that? I'm using voice mod for some of the less human voices. I just prepped this yesterday. Well, I thought my mic was muted, but it wasn't briefly, so everyone had me going, "Test, test, test," while I was tinkering. But no one heard the actual dragon voice till right now. So that was a fun little reveal. Tea time. I have some cold coffee. Does that count? Actually, I do actually have some water here as well. I'll drink some water. Okay, the fluids have been chugged. Dolgan gripped Thomas's arm in silent warning. The boy knew enough not to speak. He had also felt the same alarm he had experienced just before the wraith had attacked the day before, but this time it was almost physically felt. The undead creature was near. Putting down the lantern, Thomas shuttered it His eyes widened in sudden astonishment, for instead of the expected blackness, he saw faintly the figure of the dwarf, moving slowly forward. Without thought, he said, "Dorgan." The dwarf turned, and suddenly a black form loomed up at his back. "Behind you!" shouted Thomas. Dorgan spun to confront the wraith, instinctively bringing up his shield and Tholin's hammer. The undead creature struck at the dwarf, and only Dorgan's battle-trained reflexes and dwarven ability to sense movement in the inky darkness saved him, for he took the contact on his iron-bosked shield. The creature howled in rage at contact with the iron. Then Dorgan lashed out with the legendary weapon of his ancestors, and the creature screamed as the hammer struck its form. Blue-green light sprang about the head of the hammer, and the creature retreated, wailing in agony. "Stay behind me," shouted Dorgan. If iron irritates it, then Tholin's hammer pains it. I may be able to drive it off." Thomas began to obey the dwarf, then found his right hand crossing to pull the golden sword free of the scabbard on his left hip. Suddenly the ill-fitting armor seemed to settle more comfortably around his shoulders, and the shield balanced upon his arm as if he'd carried it for years. Without volition of his own, Thomas moved behind Dorgan, then stepped past, bringing the golden sword to the ready. The creature seemed to hesitate, then moved towards Thomas. Thomas raised his sword, readying to strike. With the sound of utter terror, the wraith turned and fled. Dorgan glanced at Thomas. Something he saw made him hesitate, as Thomas seemed to come to an awareness of himself and put up his sword. Dorgan returned to the lantern and said, "Why'd you do that, lad?" Thomas said, I don't know." Feeling suddenly self-conscious at having disobeyed the dwarf's instructions, he said, "But it worked. The thing left." "Aye, it worked," agreed Dorgan, removing the shutter from the lantern. In the light, he studied the boy. Thomas said, "I think your ancestor's hammer was too much for it." Dorgan said nothing, but he knew that wasn't the case. The creature had fled in fear from the sight of Thomas in his armor of white and gold. Then another thought struck the dwarf. "Boy, how do you know that the creature was behind me?" "I saw it." Oh, we're in ads. So engrossed in reading that I missed the banner. Sorry, chat. Let's pop it. It'll be right back here. Have I lost my music? I have lost my music. There go the ads. Dolgan closed the shutter on the lantern again and stood up. Moving a few feet away, he said, "Where am I now, lad?" Without hesitation, Thomas came to stand before him, placing a hand upon his shoulder. "Here." "What?" said the dwarf. Thomas touched the helm and the shield. "You said they were special." "Aye, lad, but I didn't think they were that special." "Should I take them off?" asked the warrior boy. No. Leaving the lantern upon the floor, Dolgan said, "We can just move more quickly if I don't have to worry about what you can and can't see." He forced a note of cheeriness into his voice. "And despite there being no two finer warriors in the land, it's best if we don't announce our presence with that light. The dragon's telling of the Moritel being down here in our minds gives me no comfort. If one band was brave enough to risk my people's wrath, and there may be others. Yon wraith may be terrified of your golden sword, my ancient hammer, 20 or so Moritel. They might not be so easily impressed." Thomas could find nothing to say, so they started moving off into the darkness. 3 times they stopped and hid, while hurrying groups of goblins and dark brothers passed nearby. From their dark vantage point, they could see that many of those who passed harbored wounds or were aided by their kinsmen as they limped along. After the last group was gone, Dolgan turned to Thomas and said, "Never in history have goblins and Mordhell dared to enter our minds in such numbers. Too much do they fear of my people to risk it." Thomas said, "They look pretty beat up, Dolgan. And they've females and young with them. They carry great bundles too. They're fleeing something." The dwarf nodded. "They're all heading from the direction of the northern valley of the Great Towers, heading toward the Green Heart. Something still drives them south." "The Serani?" Dolgan nodded. "My thought too. Come, we'd best return to the caldera as quickly as we can." They set off and soon were in tunnels Dolgan knew well, taking them to the surface and home. They were both exhausted when they reached Caldera 5 days later. The snows in the mountains were heavy, and the going was slow. As they approached the village, they were sighted by guards, and soon the entire village turned out to meet them. They were taken to the village long hall, and Thomas was given a room. He was so tired that he fell asleep at once, and even the stout dwarf was fatigued. The dwarves agreed to call the village elders together the next day in council and discuss the latest news to reach the valley. Thomas awoke, feeling ravenous. He stretched as he stood up and was surprised to feel no stiffness. He had fallen asleep in the golden mail and should have wakened to protesting joints and muscles. Instead, he felt rested and well. He opened the door and stepped into a hall. He saw no one until he came to the great central room of the long hall. There were several dwarves seated along the great table, with Dolgan at the head. Thomas saw one was Waylin, Dolgan's son. Dolgan motioned the boy to a chair and introduced him to the company. The dwarves all greeted Thomas, who made polite responses. Mostly, he stared at the great feast of food upon the table. Dolgan laughed and said, "Help yourself, laddie. There's little cause for you to be hungry with the board full." Thomas heaped a plate with beef, cheese, and bread, and took a flagon of ale, though he had little head for it, and it was early in the day. He quickly consumed what was on the platter and helped himself to another portion, looking to see if anyone disapproved. Most of the dwarves were involved in a complicated discussion of an unknown nature to Thomas, having to do with the allocation of winter stores to various villages in the area. Dolgan called a halt to the discussion and said, "Now that Thomas is with us, I think we'd best speak of these Sorani." Thomas's ears pricked up at that, and he turned his attention fully to what was being said. Dolgan continued, "Since I left on patrol, we've had runners from Elvendar and Stone Mountain. There have been many sightings of these aliens near the North Pass. They've made camp in the hills south of the Stone Mountain." One of the dwarves said, "That's Stone Mountain's business, unless they call us to arms." Dolgan said, "True, Orwin. There's also the news they've been seen moving in and out of the valley just south of the pass. They've intruded on lands traditionally ours. That is the business of the Three Towers." The dwarf addresses Owen said, "Indeed it is. There is naught we can do until spring." Dolgan put his feet upon the table, lighting a pipe. "And that's true also. But we can be thankful the Sorani can do naught until spring as well." Thomas put down a joint of beef he was holding. "Has the blizzard struck?" Dolgan looked at him. "Aye, laddie. All the passes are solid with snow, but the first winter blizzard came upon us last night. There'll be nothing that can move out there, least of all an army." Thomas looked at Dolgan. Then, "Aye, you'll guess with us this winter, or not even our hardiest runner can make his way out of these mountains to Cridey." Thomas sat back, for in spite of the comforts of the dwarven long hall, he wished for more familiar surroundings. Still, there was nothing that could be done. He resigned himself to that, and returned his attention to the meal. Chapter 11. Sorcerer's Isle. The weary group trudged into Borden. Around them rode a company of Natalie's rangers, dressed in their traditional grey tunics, trousers, and cloaks. They had been on patrol and encountered the travellers a mile out of town, and were now escorting them. Oric was irritated that the rangers had not offered to let the exhausted travellers ride double, but he hit it well. They had little reason to recognize this group of ragamuffins as the Duke of Cridey and his party. Even if he should have arrived in state, there was little warmth between the free cities of Natal and the kingdom. Pug looked at Borden with wonder. It was a small city by kingdom standards, little more than a seaport town, but far larger than Cridey. Everywhere he looked, people were hurrying about on unknown tasks, busy and preoccupied. Little attention was paid to the travellers except an occasional glance from a shopkeeper or a woman at market. Never had the boy seen so many people, horses, mules, and wagons, all in one place. It was a confusion of colours and sounds, overwhelming his senses. Barking dogs ran behind the rangers' horses, nimbly avoiding kicks by the irritated mounts. A few street boys shouted obscenities at the party, all obviously outlanders from their look, most likely prisoners from the escort. Pug was vaguely troubled by this rudeness, but his attention was quickly distracted by the newness of the city. Gordon, like other cities in the area, had no standing army, but instead supported a garrison of Natalie's Rangers, descendants of the legendary Imperial Keshian Guides, and counted among the best horse soldiers and trackers in the West. They could provide ample warning of approaching trouble and allow the local militia time to turn out. Nominally independent, the Rangers were free to dispose of outlaws and renegades on the spot, but after hearing the Duke's story and at mention of the name Martin Longbow, whom they knew well, the leader of the patrol decided this matter should be turned over to the local prefect. They were taken to the office of the local prefect, located in a small building near the city square. The Rangers appeared pleased to be shed of the prisoners and returned to their patrol as they gave custody over to the prefect. The prefect was a short, swarthy man, given to brightly coloured sashes about his ample girth and large golden rings upon his fingers. He smoothed his dark, oiled beard as the ranger captain finished his company's meeting with the Duke's party. As the ranger captain explained his company's meeting with the Duke's party. As the Rangers rode off, the prefect greeted Boric coolly, and the Duke made it clear that they were expected by Talbot Kilrain, the largest ship's broker in the city and Boric's trading agent in the Free Cities. The prefect's manner changed abruptly. They were taken from the office to the prefect's private quarters and offered hot, dark coffee. The prefect sent one of his servants with a message to the House of Kilrain and waited quietly, only occasionally making non-committal small talk with the Duke. Cargan leaned over to Pug and said, "Our host is the sort who sees which way the wind blows before making up his mind. He waits word from the merchant before deciding if we're prisoners or guests." The magician chuckled. "You'll find as you grow older that minor functionaries are the same the world over." An angry storm in the person of Meacham appeared suddenly in the doors to the prefect's home a short time later, and one of Kilrain's senior clerks at his elbow. The clerk made it clear that this was indeed the Duke of Cridey, and yes, he was expected by Talbot Kilrain. The prefect was abjectly apologetic and hopeful that the Duke would forgive the inconvenience, but under present conditions, in these troubled times, he could understand. His manner was fawning, and his smile was unctuous. Boric indicated that yes, he did understand all too well. Without any further delay, they left the prefect and went outside, where a group of grooms waited with horses. Quickly they mounted up, and Meacham and the clerk led them through the town, towards a hillside community of large, imposing houses. The house of Talbot Kilrain stood topmost upon the highest hill overlooking the city. From the road, Pug could see ships standing at anchor. Dozens of them were sitting with masts removed, obviously out of service during the harsh weather. A few coast huggers bound for Ylit in the north, or the Free Cities, were making their way cautiously in and out of the harbour. I need to look up how to pronounce the name of that town. 1 second. It might just be Lith or Yith. I must know. Also, where the shit is my bot with its messages? 1 second, chat. Blip. That blep emote's been used 2,000 times in my chat. Wild. Blip. All right. Let's get back to reading. All right. I was looking something up, wasn't I? There we go. City's pronounced Yulith. A few coast huggers bound for Yulith in the north, or other free cities, were making their way cautiously in and out of the harbour. For the most part, the harbour was quiet. They reached the house and entered an open gate in a low wall, where the servants ran to take their horses. As they dismounted, their host came through the large entrance to the house. "Welcome, Lord Boric, welcome," he said, a warm smile splitting his gaunt face. Talbot Kilrain looked like a vulture reincarnated into human form, with a balding head, sharp features, and small, dark eyes. His expensive robes did little to hide his gauntness, but there was an ease to his manner and a concern in his eyes that softened the unattractive aspect. In spite of the man's appearance, Pug found him likable. He shooed the servants off to make ready rooms and hot meals for the party. He would not listen as the Duke tried to explain the mission. Raising his hand, he said, "Later, Your Grace. We can speak at length, but after you've had rest and food. I will expect you for dinner tonight, but for now there are hot baths and clean beds for your party. I will have warm meals delivered to your quarters, good food, rest, and clean clothes, and you'll feel like a new man. Then we can speak." He clapped his hands. And a housecarl came to show them their rooms. The Duke and his son were given separate quarters, while Pug... My son lost my place. Oh God. While Pug and Colgan shared another. Garden was shown to Meacham's rooms, and the Duke's soldiers were taken to the servants' quarters. Oh, you're totally fine, Llama. It was me. I glanced away at something else on my screen, incidentally, and then my brain was like, "I've forgotten the last word I was looking at." Haha. Thank you, ADHD. And the Duke's soldiers were taken to the servants' quarters. Colgan told Pug to take the first bath while the magician spoke to his servant for a while. Meacham and Colgan went off to the Franklin's room, and Pug stripped off his dirty clothes. In the center of the room was a large metal tub filled with scented water, hot and steaming. He stepped into it and pulled his foot out quickly. After 3 days of walking through snow, the water felt as if it were boiling. Gently he placed his foot back in, and when he had become used to the heat, slowly entered the water. He sat back in the tub, the sloping back providing support. The inside of the tub was enameled, and Pug found the slick, smooth feeling strange after the wooden tubs of home. He lathered himself over with a sweet soap and washed the dirt from his hair, then stood in the tub and poured a bucket of cold water over his head to rinse off. He dried himself and put on the clean nightshirt that had been left for him. In spite of the early hour, he fell into the warm bed. His last thought was of the sandy-haired boy with a ready grin. As Pug slipped into sleep, he wondered if Dolgan had found his friend. He awoke once during the day, hearing a nameless tune being hummed, while water was being splashed about with great zeal as Colgan soaped his large body. Pug closed his eyes and was quickly asleep again. He was hard asleep when Colgan roused him for dinner. His tunic and trousers had been cleaned, and a small rent in the shirt mended. His boots were polished and shone with a black gleam. As he stood inspecting himself in a mirror, he noticed for the first time a soft black shadow on his cheeks. He leaned closer and saw the early signs of a beard. Colgan watched him and said, "Well, Pug, shall I have them fetch you a razor so you can keep your chin clean like Prince Arutha? Or do you wish to cultivate a magnificent beard?" He exaggeratedly brushed his own great beard. Pug smiled, for the first time leaving Mac Mordain Cadal. "I think I can leave off worrying about it for a time." Colgan laughed, glad to see this boy's spirits returning. The magician had been troubled at the depth of Pug's mourning for Thomas, and was relieved to see the boy's resilient nature assert itself. Colgan held the door open. "Shall we?" Pug inclined his head, imitating a courtly bow, and said, "Certes, Master Magician. After you?" And broke into a laugh. They made their way into the dining room, a large and well-lit hall, though nothing as large as in the castle of Crydy. The Duke and Prince Arutha were already seated, and Culgan and Pug quickly took their places at the table. Boric was just finishing his account of the events at Cryde and in the Great Forest when Pug and Culgan sat. "So," he said, "I chose to carry this news myself. So important I believe it to be." The merchant leaned back in his chair as servants brought a wide variety of dishes for the diners. "Lord Boric," said Talbot, "when your man Meacham first approached me, his request on your behalf was somewhat vague, due, I believe, the manner in which the information was transmitted." He referred to the magic employed by Culgan to contact Belgan, who had in turn sent the message to Meacham. "I never expected your desire to reach Crondor would prove as vital as to my own people as I now see it to be." He paused, then continued. "I am, of course, alarmed by the news you bear. I was willing to act as a broker to find you a ship, but now I will undertake to send you in one of my own vessels." He picked up a small bell that sat near his hand and rang. In a moment, a servant was standing at his shoulder. "Send word to Captain Abram to ready the Storm Queen. He leaves on tomorrow's afternoon tide for Crondor. I will send more detailed instructions later." The servant bowed and left. The Duke said, "I thank you, Master Kilrain." "Oh, I had hoped that you would understand, but I did not expect to find a ship so quickly." The merchant looked directly at Boric. "Duke Boric, let me be frank. There is little love lost between the free cities and the kingdom, and to be franker still, less love for the name Condoin. It was your grandfather who laid waste to Walinor and sieged Natal. He was stopped only 10 miles north of this very city, and that memory still rankles many of us. We are Keshian by ancestry, but Fremen by birth, and have little affection for conquerors." Kilrain continued as the Duke sat stiffly in his chair. "Still, we are forced to admit that your father, later, and yourself now have been good neighbors, treating fairly with the free cities, even generously at times. I believe you to be a man of honor and realize these Surani people are likely all you say they are. You are not the sort of man given to exaggeration, I think." The Duke relaxed a little at this. Talbot took a sip of wine, then resumed his conversation. "We would be foolish not to recognize that our best interests lie with those of the kingdom, for alone we are helpless. When you have departed, I will summon a meeting of the Council of Guilds and Merchants, and will argue for support of the kingdom in this." He smiled, and all at the table could see that here was a man as confident in his influence and authority as the Duke was in his. "I think I'll have little difficulty in making the council see the wisdom of this. A brief mention of that Sorani war gallery and a little conjecture on how our ships would fare against a fleet of such ships should convince them." Boric laughed and slapped his hand upon the table. "Master Merchant, I can see your wealth was not acquired by a lucky cast of fate's knucklebones. You have a your shrewd mind is a match for my own father Tully's. As is your wisdom, I give you my thanks." The Duke and the merchant continued to talk late into the night, but Pug was still tired and returned to his bed. When Culgan came in hours later, he found the boy lying restfully, a peaceful expression on his face. The Storm Queen ran before the wind, her topgallants and sky sails slamming her through the raging sea. The swirling, stinging, icy rain made the night so black the tops of her tall masts were lost in the hazy darkness to those who stood upon her decks. On the quarter-deck, figures huddled under a great fur-lined oilcloth cloaks, trying to stay warm and dry in the bitterly cold wetness. Twice during the last 2 weeks, they had run through high seas, but this was by far the worst weather they'd encountered. A cry went up from the rigging, and word was carried to the captain that 2 men had fallen from the yards. Duke Borek shouted to Captain Abram, "Can nothing be done?"
"Nay, my lord, they are dead men, and to search would be folly, even if possible, which it is not,"
the captain shouted back, his voice carrying over the storm's roar. A full watch was above in the treacherous rigging, knocking away the ice that was forming on the spars, threatening to crack them with additional weight, disabling the ship. Captain Abram held the rail with one hand, watching for signs of trouble, his whole body in tune with his ship. Next to him stood the Duke and Culgan, less sure of their footing on the pitching deck. A loud, groaning, cracking sound came from below. The captain swore. Moments later, a sailor appeared before him. "Captain, we've cracked a timber and she's taken water." I don't know what that accent was. The captain waved to one of his mates who stood on the main deck.
"Take a crew below and shore up the damage, then report."
The mate quickly picked 4 men to accompany him below. Colgan seemed to go into a trance for a minute before he said, "Captain, this storm will blow another 3 days." The captain cursed the luck the gods had sent him and said to the Duke,
"I can't run her before the storm for 3 days taking water. I must find a place to heave to and repair the hull."
The Duke nodded, shouting over the storm, "Are you turning for Quig?" The captain shook his head, dislodging snow and water dripping from his black beard.
"I cannot turn her into the wind for Queeg. We'll have to lie off Sorcerer's Isle."
Colgan shook his head, though the gesture was not noticed by the others. Though the magician asked, "Is there nowhere else we can put in?" The captain looked at the magician and the Duke.
"Not as close. We'd risk the loss of a mast. Then, if we didn't founder and sink, we'd lose 6 days rather than 3. The seas run higher, and I fear we may lose more men."
He shouted orders aloft and to the steersman, and they took a more southerly course, heading for Sorcerer's Isle. Colgan went below with the Duke. The rocking, surging motion of the ship made the ladder and narrow passageway difficult to navigate, and the stout magician was tossed from one side to the other as they made their way to their cabins. The Duke went into his cabin, shared with his son, and Colgan entered his own. Garden, Meacham, and Pug were trying to rest on their respective bunks during the buffeting. The boy was having a difficult time, for he had been sick the first 2 days. He had gained sea legs of a sort, but still couldn't bring himself to eat the salty pork and hardtack they were forced to consume. Because of the rough seas, the ship's cook had been unable to perform his usual duties. The ship's timbers groaned in protest, the pounding the waves were giving, and from ahead they could hear the sound of hammers as the work crew struggled to repair the breached hull. Pug rolled over and looked at Colgan. "What about the storm?" Meacham came up on one elbow and looked at his master. Garden did likewise. Colgan said, "It will blow 3 days longer. We'll put in to the lee of an island and hold there until it slackens." "What island?"
"Sorcerer's Isle."
Meacham shot up out of his bunk, hitting his head on the low ceiling. Cursing and rubbing his head while Garden stifled a laugh, he exclaimed,
"The island of Macross the Black?"
Aye, Cinderlane. You missed my dragon voice earlier. You'll have to check out the VOD.
Colgan nodded while using one hand to steady himself as the ship nosed over a high crest and forward into a deep trough.
The same.
I have little liking for the idea, but the captain fears for the ship. As if to punctuate the point, the hull creaked and groaned alarmingly for a moment. Who's Macross? Asked Pug. Cargan looked thoughtful for a moment, as much from listening to the work crew in the hold as from the boy's question. Then said, Macross is a great sorcerer, Pug. Perhaps the greatest the world has ever known. Aye, added Meacham, and the spawn of some devil from the deepest circle of hell. His arts are the blackest, even the bloody priest of Limbs Cragma feared to set foot on his islands. Garden laughed. I've yet to see a powerful wizard who could cow the death goddess' priests. He must be a powerful mage. Those are only stories, Pug, Cargan said. What we do know about him is that when the persecution of magicians reached its height in the kingdom, Macross fled to this island. No one has since travelled to or from it. Pug sat up on his bunk, interested in what he was hearing, oblivious to the terrible noise of the storm. He watched as Cargan's face was bathed in the moving half-lights and shadows by crazily swinging lanterns that danced with every lurch of the ship. Macross is very old, Cargan continues. By what arts he keeps alive only he knows, but he has lived there over 300 years. Garden scoffed. Or several men by the same name have lived there. Cargan nodded. Perhaps. In any event, there is nothing truly known about him, except terrible tales told by sailors. I suspect that even if Macross does practice the darker side of magic, his reputation is greatly inflated, perhaps as a means of securing privacy. A loud cracking noise, as if another timber in the hull had split, quieted them. The cabin rolled with the storm, and Meacham spoke all their minds. And I'm hoping we'll be able to stand upon Sorcerer's Isle. The ship limped into the southern bay of the island. They would have to wait until the storm subsided before they could put divers over the side to inspect the damage to the hull. Cargan, Garden, and Meacham came out on deck. The weather was slightly kinder with the cliffs cutting the fury of the storm. Pug walked to where the captain and Cargan were standing. He followed their gaze up to the top of the cliffs. High above the bay sat a castle, its tall towers outlined against the sky by the grey of the day. It was a strange place, with spires and turrets pointing upward like some clawed hand. The castle was dark, save for one window in a high tower that shone with blue, pulsating light, as if lightning had been captured and put to work by the inhabitant. Pug heard Meacham say, There, upon the bluff, Macross. 3 days later, the divers broke the surface and yelled to the captain their appraisal of the damage. Pug was on the main deck with Meacham, Garden, and Cargan. Prince Arutha and his father stood near the captain, awaiting the verdict on the ship's condition. Above, the seabirds wheeled, looking for the scraps and garbage heralded by a ship in these waters. The storms of winter did little to supplement the meagre feeding of the birds, and a ship was a welcome source of fare. Arutha came down to the main deck where the others waited. It will take all of this day and half tomorrow to repair the damage, but the captain thinks it will hold fair until we reach Crondor. We should have little trouble from here. Meacham and Garden threw each other meaningful glances. Not wanting to let the opportunity pass, Cargan said, Will we be able to put ashore, Your Highness? Arutha rubbed his clean-shaven chin with a gloved hand. Aye, though not one sailor will put a boat out to carry us. Us? Asked the magician. Arutha smiled his crooked smile. I've had my fill of cabins, Cargan. I feel the need to stretch my legs on firm grounds. Besides, without supervision, you'd spend the day wandering about places where you've no business. Pug looked up toward the castle, his glance noted by the magician. We'll keep clear of that castle and the road up from the beach, to be sure. The tales of this island only speak of ill coming to those who seek to enter the sorcerer's halls. Arutha signaled a seaman. The boat was readied, and the 4 men and the boy got aboard. The boat was hauled over the side and lowered by a crew sweating despite the cold wind that still blew after the storm. By the glances they kept throwing towards the crest of the bluffs, Pug knew they were not sweating because of work or weather. As if reading his thoughts, Arutha said, "There may be a more superstitious breed on Midkemia than sailors, but who they are I could not tell you." When the boat was in the water, Meacham and Garden cast off the lines that hung suspended from the davits. The 2 men awkwardly took oars and began to row toward the beach. It was a broken, stuttering rhythm at first.
Exclamation mark thirst, and it's just random clips of your hands doing various things that are thirst traps.
Believe it or not, Uni, 85% or more of the things my hands do are thirst traps. And the other 15% are downright against which TOS did broadcast. Right now, I'm spreading this book wide open with my hands. And I am pressing the leaves of this book apart with my thumb. You see, even describing holding a book can sound incredibly lurid with the right tone of voice and the correct words. Speaking of thirst, hi Cinderlin. All right, I am adding your command request to my to-do list. Would anybody else like to be added to the to-do list? We've just added Uni to it. Get your hands in. Nice. You know what, guys? Do you want to hear the dragon voice for those of you that missed it?
This is the voice of Rahu, the golden dragon, last of his kind, last dragon sorcerer of Midkemia.
So that was a fun little bit. We met Rao. Blurb was really loud. Thanks for the bits though. That blurb was so loud it came out of my speakers and went back into my mic, so you guys heard it twice. And my avatar moved his mouth, so he moaned with it. That was so fucking cursed. Oh man. Good shit. I ran out of music again. Playlist. Be done. We'll play this one. Yeah, I'm digging that. heading to a convention this weekend in Birmingham, Alabama. Take my best mini dress. You're going to be throwing out all that ass and making all that eye contact at the same time, aren't you? I know you're kryptonite now, Uni. It's the eyes. Lynn, it's cheating if you communicate by emotes and the emotes contain words. That's cheating. More reading. More reading. Listen, I didn't get much attention as a child. Of course, that would develop into something as an adult. You can say as many bad things as you like. You can be as unhinged as you fucking like. This week, there is no Mealtime Junior to read my chats. So you guys can be as thirsty and degenerate as you fucking want. Junior will be here on Friday. So then we got to be a little bit toned down for the week. But then at the end of Friday, you guys can go wild again. Week on, week off with the ultra degeneracy. Degeneracy is always going to be a thing here. But on the weeks where Junior is not here to read the chats, you guys can fucking go all the way off. Or get yourselves all the way off. Both if you'd like. Then picks though. No pics, no proof. Ifime says, I should either read this myself, catch up, or listen to all the VODs. I only catch these bits and pieces, and currently we have one boy with 4 men on a ship and a bunch of sweaty sailors giving glances, but it's warm for a normal sweating. The foot one's my favorite one just because of the name. And just because every single time Excellent Flex sees it, he has a little micro meltdown about it. It's like the most passive bullshit way of trolling him that I could come up with. Merely because every single time he sees that thing, he knows his name is attached to it, and he knows that people might see his name on it and start to ask questions. He will then be forced to recount the story of how he described his wife's feet as pretty and little, and became labeled as a footman on the internet for years. It is the most passive and insidious form of fuckery that I could think of. I don't even have to be there to fuck with him now. And I mean, I usually am. No, other people can do my bidding. In this fevered state where I play host to strange afflictions, bound to want what I may never cease to crave, filled and released on sadistic whim, my mind stirs still with a longing deep, a hunger sharpened yet unseen, for what succulent richness disease's kiss may bring from our reader, our father. With that recounting, it will never go away. indeed. With that recount, every time he is forced to... Yeah, look at that. My little... Be my YouTube sub? Message is working. Yes, every time Flex is forced to recount the tale of him calling his wife's feet pretty and little, and then he will double down a bit. He'll be like, they are pretty and little. It just deepens the lore that Flex is indeed a foot enjoyer. So yeah, there's the lore on why that emote is named the way it is. Uni. Some say I became a Twitch affiliate just so I could have an emote slot to taunt Flex with. It was rather delightful of you. I did enjoy it. Uni likes them photos where the toes are pointed at the camera. And the subject of the photo is looking back over the shoulder. Where to look first? The eyes, the butt, the toesies. I see you, Uni. I see you and I know you. How dare you out me in this public space that you control? How dare you be fatherless and have the name Dad? Disgusting behavior. The frog pose. I do enjoy the frog pose, and not because of the feet, incidentally. It's just for everything else that's shown in that pose. Getting all hot under the collar here. Yes, back to the book, back to our regularly scheduled, non-degenerate content. But with disapproving looks from the prince, along with several comments about how the men could spend their lives in a sea town and not know how to row, finally they got the boat moving in good order. Fuck is this track? Nope. Fuck out of here. They put in at a sandy stretch of beach, a little cove that broke the bluffs of the bay. Upward towards the castle ran a path, which joined another leading away across the island. Pug leapt out of the boat and helped pull it ashore. And it was fast aground. The others got out and stretched their legs. Pug felt as if they were being watched. But each time he looked around, there was nothing in sight but the rocks and the few seabirds that lived in the winter in clefts of the cliff face. Targan and the prince studied the two paths up from the beach. The magician looked at the other path away from the sorcerer's castle and said, "There should be little harm in exploring the other trail, shall we?" Days of boredom and confinement outweighs whatever anxiety they felt. With a brusque nod, Arutha led the way up the trail. Pug followed last behind Meacham. The big-shouldered Franklin was armed with a broadsword, upon which his hand rested. Pug kept his sling handy, for he still didn't feel comfortable with a sword, though Garden was giving him lessons where possible. The boy fingered the sling absently, his eyes taking in the scene before them. Along the trail, they startled several colonies of turnstones and plovers, which took flight when the party came near. The birds squawked their protests and hovered near their roosts till the hikers passed, then returned to the scant comfort of the hillside. Here come ads, folks, so we're going to take a break. I'm redeeming this one as well, oddly enough. Hey, Uni. Hey, Uni. You over there, Uni. You're a very, very, very fucking good girl. I hope you're having a wonderful night. And a female, while we're on the topic of boys and girls that are good. You're an extremely good boy. I'm so glad both of you are here spending your time with me. Mwah. First one's free, Uni. On the house. We can do 3 for 3, Cinderlin. Do I get to have all 3 of you at once? 2 good girls and a good boy? What an exciting night for me. Cinderlin, I think we all know that you are a wonderfully good girl. Thank you for all you do for the stream. I appreciate you so much. Yeah, Uni, that redemption that I put in was so I could give you that redemption. Like I said, the first one's on the house. I'm pregnant. I'm dad. That combination of dad joke and the low, sexy voice is fucking psychotic. By the way, Uni, just for your awareness, I am lounging in my chair the same way that many of your thirst traps sit in their thrones. Please enjoy that mental imagery. This fucking shit again. Get out of here. Okay, half of this shit is like cheery sea breeze music. I don't want any of that. I'm getting all the cheerful jazz shit. No. No! Chill jazz. Take a little peek at this map, shall we? Whoop. Oh. The throne sit. The chokehold. The eye contact. Okay. Over on the left, on the far left, is Cryde, where our story started. Just below the Great Northern Mountain Range. Elvendar is where the elves lives. The Green Heart is where our heroes traveled through and were ambushed by the Dark Brotherhood. On their way down to Borden, which is just above that little like blob. You can't see my mouse cursor. It's above that little blob called the Kingdom of Krieg. Somewhere within Stone Mountain, no, within Grey Towers is where Thomas is hanging out with the dwarves for the entirety of winter. So that's where we are right now. We are in Bordon. Where we're headed is on the right hand side, the island of Rillanon, which is within the Kingdom Sea. So yeah, that's the scoop. I have covered myself with the map. Unacceptable. I fucked it. Finland says, I like how Daddy says for the stream when he knows everything I do is for him. Keep it secret. Keep it safe. Oh yeah, I forgot. We were doing whispery stuff in the microphone yesterday. How much is being picked up by my mic? Does it drop out when I whisper? Please tell me. If it does, I guess I'll fuck with my sound settings some more. It's free real estate. I can't not stop. I just cannot stop myself from fucking doing that whenever I whisper. Meme is permanently etched into my mind. can still feel the breath very clearly. I mean, here.
It's free real estate. It's free real estate.
Thanks for the biddies, Uni. I think it came from like a legitimate serious as fuck ad that someone made that was really cringe. And it was just so cringe that they grabbed it. It's free real estate. And it just became this timeless meme from the golden era of the internet. That's from the Tim and Eric Awesome Show. That's right. Yeah, it's part of a much longer clip. These vague memories are surfacing now. From a time on the internet before the word Riz was ever spoken, or the word skibbity existed in anyone's lexicon. A better time, a more civilized time. They crested up the first series of hills, and then the path away from the castle could be seen to dip behind another crest. Kalgan said, "It must lead somewhere. Shall we continue?" Arutha nodded, and the others said nothing. They continued their journey until they came to a small valley, little more than a dell, between two ranges of low hills. On the floor of the valley sat some buildings. Arutha said softly, "What do you think, Kalgan? Are they inhabited?" Kalgan studied them for a moment, then turned to Meacham, who stepped forwards. The Franklin inspected the vista below, his gaze travelling from the floor of the vale to the hills around. "I think not. There's no sign of smoke from the cook fires, nor sound of people working." Arutha resumed his march down towards the floor of the valley, and the others followed. Meacham turned to watch Pug for a moment, then noticed the boy was unarmed except for his sling. The Franklin pulled a long hunting knife from his belt and handed it to the boy without comment. Pug bobbed his head once in acknowledgement and took the knife in silence. They reached a plateau above the buildings, and Pug could see an alien-looking house. The central building circled by a large court and several outbuildings. The entire property was surrounded by a low wall, no more than 4 feet tall. They worked their way down the hillside to a gate in the wall. There were several barren fruit trees in the courtyard, and a garden area overgrown with weeds. Near the front of the central building, a fountain stood, topped with a statue of 3 dolphins. They approached the fountain and saw that the interior of the low pool surrounding the statue was covered in blue tiles, faded and discolored with age. Kalgan examined the construction of the fountain. "This is fashioned in a clever manner. I believe that water should issue from the mouths of the dolphins." Arutha agreed. "I have seen the king's fountains in Rillanon, and they are similar, though lacking the grace of this." There was little snow on the ground, for it seemed the sheltered valley and the entire island received even little in the most severe winters. But it was still cold. Pug wandered a little way off and studied the house. It had a single story, with windows every 10 feet along the wall. There was but one opening for a double door in the wall he stood facing, though the doors were long off their hinges. Whoever lived here expected no trouble. Pug turned to see Garden standing behind him, staring at the house as well.
There's no tower for lookout, continued the sergeant, and the wall seems low. Seems more likely to keep livestock out of the garden than for defense.
Meacham joined them, hearing Garden's last remark.
Aye, there's little concern for defense here. This is the lowest spot on the island, save for that small stream you could just see behind the house when we came down the hill.
He turned to stare up at the castle, the highest spires of which could be seen from the valley.
This is where you build for trouble. This place,
he said, indicating the low buildings with a sweep of his hand.
This place was fashioned by those who knew little of strife.
Pug nodded as he moved away. Garden and Meacham headed in a different direction, back toward an abandoned stable. Pug moved around to the back of the house and found several smaller buildings. He clutched his knife in his right hand and entered the closest.
Oh. Why are you long?
He's a tall boy. I don't think you're supposed to just ask people why they're long, Mochi. And that's not how you ask people. Like, if someone like that was like 6'5" came up to you,
That's
would
not
you be
the
like,
first
why are
question
you
you
long?
ask. Why are you long?
Jeez.
Welcome in, Raiders. Mochi, why is it always the long clip? Every raid I've seen of you is the long clip. But more importantly, why is he long? Why is Gamora? Hey, Arsenal, welcome in. Raiders, welcome in. My name is Mealtime with Dad. Mochi, I would give you the normal interrogation of how your stream has been and how your day's been going, but you have said you need to raid and run. So, I won't do that. I will instead bid you a good night. Thank you so much for the raid. Folks, if you don't follow Mochi Fern, she's a lovely little bean. She's been playing lots of different games, Helldivers and Hades among them, and we do all love a bit of Hades nuts. So, throw her a follow. Follows are free. You never know, you might find your forever streamer in her. Raiders that came in with Mochi, my name is Mealtime with Dad. I'm a variety streamer. I'm a PNG tuber. And if you like accents, if you like cooking streams, gaming streams where you play narrative-driven games, or if you can't read but wished you could, or if you just like a good story, you'll find all that here, in addition to yapping and art. Right now, we are continuing our read-through of Magician by Raymond E. Feist. It's the first book of a 30-book series called The Rift War Cycle. This is like the newest addition to our stream. We're a mental health positive place. If anyone is struggling with something they haven't been able to talk about, you're welcome to talk about it here, because a shared burden is a lighter burden. Outside of that, please be yourselves, settle in, get cozy, and expect some fucking degenerate humor, because it ranges from tongue-in-cheek to tongue-in-asshole here. And there is absolutely no shame in how I deliver my jokes. If you want to catch when I'm going live, see the recipes I'm cooking, or just get to know other people in this community, you can hit up the Discord link that Makers kindly delivered into the chat. And yeah, that's it. No raid trailer. I've only been streaming for like 5 months. This is month 6. I think. If anyone who came in with the raid is a streamer as well, let me know. Throw up a little 07, a little hello. We'd love to get to know you. Thanks for the follow, Fem Army Vet. Welcome on in. Fem Army Vet's a streamer. Throw her a follow too. Now, getting back to the topic at hand, in this book, Pug nodded as he moved away. Garden and Meacham headed in a different direction toward an abandoned stable. Pug moved around to the back of the house and found several smaller buildings. He clutched his knife in his right hand and entered the closest. It was open to the sky, for the roof had collapsed. Red roof tiles, shattered and faded, lay about the floor in what seemed to be a storage room, with large wooden shelves along 3 walls. Pug investigated the other rooms in the building, finding them to be of similar configuration. The entire building was some sort of storage area. He moved to the next building and found a large kitchen. A stone stove stood against one wall, big enough for several kettles to cook upon it simultaneously, while a spit hung over the back opening above the fire. While a spit hung over the back opening above the fire was large enough for a beef side or a whole lamb. A mammoth butcher's block stood in the center of the room, scarred from countless blows of cleaver and knife. Pug examined a strange-looking bronze pot in the corner, overlaid with dust and cobwebs. He turned it over and found a wooden spoon. As he looked up, he thought he saw a glimpse of someone outside the door of the cookhouse. "Meacham? Garden?" he asked, as he slowly approached the door. When he stepped outside, there was no one in sight, but he did catch another glimpse of movement at the rear door of the main house. He hurried toward that door, assuming his companions had already entered the building. As he entered the main house, he caught a hint of movement down a side corridor. He stopped for a moment to survey the strange house. The door before him stood open, a sliding door fallen from railings that had once held it in place. Through the door he could see a large central courtyard open to the sky above. The house was actually a hollow square with pillars holding up the interior of the partial roof. Another fountain and a small garden occupied the very center of this courtyard. Like the one outside, the fountain was in disrepair, and this garden was also choked with weeds. Pug turned towards the hall down which he had seen movement. They passed through a low side door and into a shadowy corridor. In places, the roof had lost several tiles, though occasionally light shone down from above, making it easy for the boy to find his way. He passed 2 empty rooms. He suspected they might be sleeping quarters. He turned a corner to find himself before the door of an odd-looking room and entered. The walls were tile mosaics of sea creatures sporting in the foam, with scantily dressed men and women. The style of art was new to Pug. The few tapestries and fewer paintings on display in the Duke's halls were all very lifelike, with muted colours and detailed execution in the finish. These mosaics were suggestive of people and animals without capturing details. On the floor was a large depression like a pool, with steps leading down before him. Out of the wall opposite obtruded a brass fish head hanging over the pool. The nature of the room was beyond Pug. As if someone had read his thoughts, a voice from behind him said, "It is a tepidarium." Pug turned and saw a man standing before him. He was of average height, with a high forehead and deep-set black eyes. There were streaks of grey at the temples of his dark hair, but his beard was black as night. He wore a brown robe of simple material and a whipcord belt around his waist. In his left hand he held a sturdy oak staff. Pug came on guard, holding the long hunting knife before him. "Nay, lad, put up your skaram sacks. I mean you no harm." He smiled in a way that made Pug relax. Pug lowered his knife and said, "What did you call this room?" "A tepidarium," he said, entering the room. Here, warm water was piped into the pool, and bathers would remove their clothing and place them on those shelves. He pointed to some shelves against the rear wall. Servants would clean and dry the clothing of dinner guests while they bathed here. Pug thought the idea of dinner guests bathing at someone's home in a group a novel one, but he said nothing. The man continued, "Through that door," he pointed to a door next to the pool, "was another pool with very hot water, called a calidarium. Beyond there was another pool with cold water in a room called a frigidarium. There was a fourth room called the unctorium, where servants would rub down the bathers with scented oils, and they scraped their skins with wooden sticks. They didn't use soap then." Pug was confused by all the different bathing rooms. That sounds like a lot of time spent getting clean. This is all very odd. The man leaned on his staff. "So it must seem to you, Pug. Still, I expect those that built this house would consider your keep hall strange as well." Pug started. "How did you know my name?" The man smiled again. "I heard the tall soldier call you by name as you approached the building. I was watching you, keeping out of sight, until I made sure you were not pirates come to seek ancient loot. Few pirates come so young, so I thought it would be safe to speak with you." Pug studied the man. There was something about him that suggested hidden meanings in his words. "Why would you speak to me?" The man sat on the edge of the empty pool. The hem of his robe was pulled back, revealing cross-gartered sandals of sturdy construction. "I am alone mostly, and the chance to speak with strangers is a rare thing, so I thought to see if you would visit with me a while, for a few moments at least, until you return to your ship." Pug sat down also, but kept a comfortable distance between himself and the stranger. "Do you live here?" The man looked around the room. "No, though I did, once, long ago." There was a contemplative note in his voice, as if the admission were calling up long-buried memories. "Who are you?" The man smiled again, and Pug felt his nervousness diminish. Let's try that one again. The man smiled again, and Pug felt his nervousness vanish. There was something reassuring about his manner, and Pug could see that he intended no harm. "Mostly, I am called the Traveller, for many lands have I seen. Here I am sometimes known as the Hermit, for so I live. You may call me what you like. It is all the same." Pug looked at him closely. "Have you no proper name?" "Many, so many that I have forgotten a few. At the time of my birth I was given a name, as you were, but amongst those of my tribe it is a name known only to the father and the mage priest." Pug considered this. "It's all very strange, much like this house. Who are your people?" The man called the Traveller laughed, a good-natured chuckle. "You have a curious mind, Pug, full of questions. That's good." He paused for a moment and then said, "Where are you and your companions from? The ship in the bay flies the Natalie's banner of Borden, but your accent and dress are of the kingdom." Pug said, "We are of Cryde," and gave the man a brief description of the journey. The man asked a few simple questions, and without being aware of it, Pug found that he had soon given a full accounting of the events that had brought them to the island, and the plans for the rest of the journey. When he had finished, the traveller said, "That is a wondrous story indeed. I think that there will be many more wonders before this strange meeting of worlds is finished." Pug questioned him with a look. "I don't understand." The traveller shook his head. "I don't expect you to, Pug. Let us say that things are occurring that can't be understood only by examination after the fact. Things are occurring that can only be understood only by examination after the fact, with a distance of time separating the participants from the participating." Pug scratched his knee. "You sound like Kalgan trying to explain how magic works." The traveller nodded. "An apt comparison, though sometimes the only way to understand the workings of magic is to work magic." Pug brightened. "Are you also a magician?" The traveller stroked his long, black beard. "Some have thought of me one, but I doubt that Kalgan and I share the same understanding of such things." Pug's expression showed he considered this an unsatisfactory explanation, even if he didn't say so. The traveller leaned forward. I can effect a spell or two, if that answers your question, young Pug." Pug heard his name shouted from the courtyard. "Come," said the traveller. "Your friends call. We had best go and reassure them that you are all right." They left the bathing room and crossed the open court of the inner garden. A large anteroom separated the garden from the front of the house, and they passed through to the outside. When the others saw Pug in the company of the traveller, they looked around quickly, their weapons drawn. Kalgan and the prince crossed the court to stand before them. The traveller put up his hands in a universal sign that he was unarmed. The prince was the first to speak. "Who is your companion, Pug?" Pug introduced the traveller. "He means no harm. He hid until he could see that we were not pirates." He handed the knife to Meacham. If the explanation was unsatisfactory, Arutha gave no sign. "What is your business here?" The traveller spread his hands with the staff in the crook of his left arm. "I abide here, Prince of Cryde. I should think that the question better serves me." Prince stiffened at being addressed so, but after a tense moment relaxed. "If that is so, then you are correct, for we are the intruders. We came seeking relief from the solitary confines of the ship, nothing more." The traveller nodded. "Then you are welcome at the Villa Beata." Kalgan said, "What is Villa Beata?" The traveller made a sweeping motion with his right hand. "This home is Villa Beata. In the language of the builders, it means blessed home. And so it was for many years. As you can see, it has known better days." Everyone was relaxing with the traveller, but they also felt a reassurance in his easy manner and friendly smile. Kalgan said, "What of those who built this strange place?" "Dead, or gone. They thought this the Insula Beata, or Blessed Isle, when they first came here. They fled a terrible war which changed the history of their world." His dark eyes misted over, as if the pain of remembering was great. "A great king died, or is thought to have died, for some say he may return. It was a terrible and sad time. Here they sought to live in peace." The traveller shrugged. "Pirates or goblins, sickness or madness, who can tell? I saw this home as you see it now, and those who lived here were gone. Arutha said, You speak of strange things, friend traveller. I know little of such, but it seems that this place has been deserted for ages. How is it that you know those who lived here? The traveller smiled. It is not so long ago as you would imagine, Prince of Cryde. And I am older than I look. It comes from eating well and bathing regularly. Meacham had been studying the stranger for the entire time. For all of those who had come ashore, his was the most suspicious nature.
And what of the black one? Does he not trouble you?
The traveller looked over his shoulder at the top of the castle. Macross the Black? The magician and I have little cause to be at odds. He suffers me the run of the island, as long as I don't interfere with his work. A suspicion crossed Pug's mind, but he said nothing as the traveller continued. Such a powerful and terrible sorcerer has little to fear from a simple hermit, I'm sure you'll agree. He leaned forward and added in conspiratorial tones. Besides, I think much of his reputation is inflated and overboasted to keep intruders away. I doubt he's capable of the feats attributed to him. Arutha said, Perhaps we should visit this sorcerer. The hermit looked at the prince. Don't think you would find a welcome at the castle. The sorcerer is oftentimes preoccupied with his work and suffers interruption with poor grace. He may not be the mythical author of all the world's ills that some imagine him to be, but he could still cause more trouble than it's worth to visit him. On the whole, he's often poor company. There was a faint, wry hint of humour at his words. Arutha looked around and said, I think we have seen of all of interest we are likely to. Perhaps we should return to the ship. When none disagreed, the prince said, What of you, friend traveller? The stranger spread his hands in a general gesture. I continue with my habit of solitude, your highness. I have enjoyed this small visit, and the boy's news of occurrences of the world outside, but I doubt you'd find me tomorrow if you were even to seek me. It was evident that he was unlikely to provide any more information, and Arutha found himself growing irritated with the man's obscure answers. Then we bid you farewell, traveller. May the gods watch over you. And you as well, Prince of Cryde. As they turned to leave, Pug felt something trip his ankle, and he fell hard against Calgon. Both went down in a tangle of bodies, and the traveller helped the boy up. Meacham and Garden assisted the stout mage to his feet. Calgon put weight upon his foot and started to fall. Arutha and Meacham grabbed him. The traveller said, It appears your ankle is turned, friend magician. Here. He held out his staff. My staff is stout oak and will bear your weight as you return to the ship. Calgon took the offered staff and put his weight on it. He took an experimental step and found that he could negotiate the part with the aid of the staff. Thank you, but what of yourself? The stranger shrugged. A simple staff easily replaced, friend magician. Perhaps I shall have the opportunity of reclaiming it someday. I will keep it against that day. The traveller turned away, saying, Good. Then until that day again, farewell. They watched as he walked back into the building, then turned to face each other, expressions of wonder upon their faces. Arutha was the first to speak. A strange man, this traveller. Calgon nodded. More strange than you know, Prince. At his leaving, I feel the lifting of some enchantment, as if he carries a spell about him, one that makes all near him trusting. Pug turned to Kalgan. I wanted to ask him so many questions, but I didn't seem able to make myself. Meacham said,
Aye, I felt that also.
Garden said,
There's a thought in my mind. I think we've been speaking to the sorcerer himself.
Pug said, That's my thought. Kalgan leaned on the staff and said, Perhaps, if it is so, then he has his own reasons for masking his identity. They talked about this as they walked slowly up the path from the villa. As they reached the cove where the boat was beached, Pug felt something brush against his chest. He reached inside his tunic and found a small folded piece of parchment. He withdrew it, startled by his find. He had not picked it up as well as he could remember. The traveller must have slipped it inside his shirt when he helped Pug to his feet. Kalgan looked back as he started for the boat, and seeing Pug's expression, said, What have you there? Pug handed over the parchment, while the others gathered around the magician. He read it, and a surprised expression crossed his face. He read it again aloud. I welcome those who come with no malice in their hearts. You will know in days to come that our meeting was not by chance. Until we meet again, keep the hermit's staff as a sign of friendship and goodwill. Seek me not until the appointed time, for that too is foreordained. Macross. Kalgan handed the message back to Pug, who read it. Then the hermit was Macross. Meacham rubbed his beard. This is something beyond my understanding. Kalgan looked up at the castle, where the light still flashed in the single window. As it is beyond mine, old friend. But whatever it means, I think the sorcerer wishes us well. And I find that is a good thing. They returned to the ship and retired to their cabins. After a night of rest, they found the ship was ready to leave on the midday tide. As they raised sail, they were greeted with unseasonably light breezes, blowing them directly for Krondor. That concludes Chapter 11. Chapter 12 is called Councils. But we will continue that another time. Let's take a little peek here at my schedule. When am I doing reading next? We could continue this on Friday. What do we think, chat? More book on Friday? Actually, no. I'll have my son on Friday evening, and I'd like to spend some time with him. So, we will return to this book on Monday. Now I'm going to go take us over to visit Ultrasaurus, who's playing Civilization 7, which should be a pretty peaceful, chill environment to hang out in. But first, as is tradition, we must raid and rhyme. I've put together some words. Alex is on. Let's see what Alex is doing. What's that bean up to? He doesn't have a category set, Cinderlin. I don't know what he's doing. Okay, I am writing up a little rhyme here for our raid message. I was saying I've raided Alex fairly recently, but I haven't raided Ultrasaurus in forever. So I'm gonna give her a little raid. You ate my bonus. Thank you very much for the follow. Welcome on in. Here's our raid message. Today we delved into depths untold, where the hero Thomas's story unfolds. We heard the deaths of Dragon Rao and sailed upon storm seas so rough. But now the stream is at an end, and we've come to visit our good friend. Mealtime is here, and he brought his crew. Ultrasaurus, it's over to you. Folks, I'm streaming tomorrow at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'm going to be cooking some food. I'll be cooking up a loaded chorizo and cheese burrito poutine, which is a lot of words, with salsa fresca, lime crema, and tangy guacamole. And then at 8 p.m. the same day, I'll be playing some more Hades Nuts. So, if you want to catch me live, head up that exclamation point Discord. You know the times, you know the place. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me tonight. Thank you so much, Mochifern, for the raid. Thank you for the new follows from You Ate My Bolus. Just glad to be here. 70 Chevelles, 454. Villy Beans, Red the Gentle Giant. Actually, Red the Gentle Giant was yesterday. It's been a pleasure being your entertainer tonight. And I'll see you when I see you. Good night.